Good evening. I'm Enarida Lord and welcome to Churikua. Sometimes you don't realize how lucky you are even to enjoy just those mundane pleasures like a day off, a coffee, or even something a little more substantial for the spirit. I will tell you my story, the one that brings me to the Belgrade church to pray and light a candle for a man's soul that resonates everywhere. And just as history can be cruel at times to those who lack historical relevance and come from such an austere birth that there is a barely enough record of their existence. In my case, this happened just a couple of nights ago. I went out drinking with some friends, and for some reason, we ended up on the banks of the Seine talking about this and that. In the end, we ended up walking so much and wanting to live an adventure that we came up with the idea of going to the catacombs. One of my friends was a guide, but since he was so drunk, we decided to let him sleep at the entrance, take his keys, and go on an adventure. It turns out that group, not counting our friend the guide, was of 4 people, but in the end only 2 of us went in. The other one of our friends, surely afraid and wanting to dissimulate, preferred to stay to witness and alert us in case someone else came and saw us. We walked part of the way together. However, at one point we decided to separate and go our separate ways. With some care, I was watching where I was going, but at one point I ended up getting disoriented and without realizing where I was going and where I was going. I sat down to rest a little and I guess I fell asleep. When I woke up, I saw a light and I thought at first it was our friend, the guide, or some other of my friends, but no. The one who was coming in was The one who was coming in was no one else we know. The one who was entering was nothing more and nothing less than a man about 60 years old, dressed in very old clothes, ancient clothes, perhaps from the time of the revolution. He looked at me scared and did not hesitate to greet me and speak to me. "Good man, may I ask you what are you doing here?" "I'm lost, and to tell you the truth, I'm beginning to fear for my life." "Are you?" "We seem to be in the same situation. May I ask you your name?" "That's right, my name is Pierre. And yours?" "Philibert Aspairt, at your service." "May I ask you how you got here?" I began to tell him in broad strokes how a night of drinking led us to an improbable challenge to come and dare us to enter the catacombs. My surprise was that Philibert was extremely upset that the authorities did not catch us, as the price paid for such an act would be terrible. So we decided to walk and look for a way out, and as we walked together looking for at least where I entered, he told me his story. I was work. I had many siblings, however. We survived, barely 5 of us. I barely learned to read and write only what was necessary to understand lists of materials, names, and short phrases. I started as an apprentice stonemason since I was a child, about 8 or 9 years old. It was all work and dedication, not to mention doing what was necessary to survive the revolution, which brought great changes and difficulties until I met my wife, Elizabeth, with whom we had served wonderful children. However, life takes care of bringing joys, misfortunes, and making you slower and less agile with age. That happened to me. As the years went by, I could no longer work stonemason. You had to earn a living somehow, and for Elizabeth and I, who now live alone despite visits of our children and grandchildren, I had to look for alternatives. I started working as a janitor in different businesses until one day I managed to become the janitor and the person in charge. I started working as a porter in different businesses until one day I managed to become the porter at the Baldgrass Hospital. I do my job as well as I can. However, I heard noises in the backyard. I decided to go in and check that everything was in order. I opened a door that was closed and noticed that it was the entrance to this place. I thought I heard screams as if someone was looking for help. I got desperate like you. I sat down for a while after getting tired, and I don't know, it seemed like hours or even days had passed. When I woke up and turned on my lantern, I walked a little and I found you, something that represents a great relief for me. Together we walked somehow. It was comforting to know that someone else was coming with me and that I was not alone. After all, the initial fear, some company, although somewhat strange, was welcome, and more if it is with company. We could go out. Little by little, I began to remember a path I had been on, and a few meters ahead, my friend the guide came running with a flashlight. After a bating breath, he said how much he had been worried about me, since it was a couple of hours before dawn, and when he saw that I was not coming out, he decided to come looking for me. I smiled at him and immediately told him I was not coming alone. However, when I turned around and called Philibert, he was not there. It was if he had vanished out nowhere. I called him, but there was no answer. Once outside, and after meeting with the others, I knew that I was the last to leave. My other friend, Claude, who came in with me at the beginning, according to what he said shortly after we parted, was so terrified that he decided to return. And when they saw that I did not come out, they had no choice but to wake up the guide and tell him what happened. He was immediately upset and looked for a flashlight to go inside and look for me. As I found out later that day while dealing with the hangover, that nice man I was in the tunnel with was a man who had found the end of his life in the catacombs without being able to get out. Somehow, it gave me something to think about, that this poor man passed away there without finding his way out, something I feel fortunate about, although if I look at it closely, it is as if he had helped me to get out, and so he too could finally get out of there, or at least that's what I like to believe. I felt it as a great detail, or as a way to thank that good man for coming here to Baldgrass to pray for his soul and to thank him for not leaving me alone and to give me a chance that he never had anymore, to be able to see the light of the day again.